What should you consider before collecting a single image for your research? Imagine you're starting a research project that uses photos, videos, or other forms of visual data. Before collecting any material, it is important to think ahead, not only about your research questions, but also about how you will protect the people represented in the data and manage the copyright of your visual materials. Visual data present particular challenges. Unlike text, an image can easily reveal a person's identity. A face, a location, an object in the background, or even the circumstances captured in a photograph may make someone recognizable. This means that anonymity can be difficult to guarantee. So, how should data protection, data security, and copyright be considered at each stage of the research process? Let's say you're designing a project that will involve collecting photographs or videos of research participants. During the research design phase, ask yourself how the visual data will be collected, stored, anonymized, accessed, and eventually shared. Ask yourself, which materials could be made openly available? Which materials would require restricted access? And what type of license should be applied to define how the data may be reused while taking copyright, data protection, and ethical requirements into account? These decisions should be made at the very beginning of the project. Planning them early and documenting them in the data management plan helps protect participants and ensures that the research complies with legal and ethical requirements. At the same time, data security needs to be built into the project from the start. Visual data should be stored in trusted repositories or secure research environments that provide encryption, secure authentication, controlled access, and long-term preservation. Good documentation and metadata are just as important. They explain how the visual data were created, what consent has been obtained, who is allowed to access the material, and whether any restrictions apply to its future reuse. As your project moves into the analysis and interpretation phase, your visual data may be transformed, enriched, or otherwise modified as researchers work with and interpret them. Images may be copied, coded, annotated, compared, edited, or combined with other materials. New files and datasets are created. And as the number of files increases, so does the risk of accidental disclosure, unauthorized access, or data loss. This is why secure workflows remain essential throughout the analytical process. Access should be restricted to authorized collaborators. Version controls should be used to keep track of changes, and every analytical step should be documented. These measures help preserve both the integrity of the research and the confidentiality of the people represented in the data. When your project reaches the archiving and preservation phase, another question emerges. How can you make your research outputs available for the future, but always responsibly? Before archiving visual data, reassess the risks. Could individuals still be identified in the images or videos? Are additional protection measures needed? Do you have permission to share the visual materials? And who owns the copyright? This last question can be more complex than it appears. Participants may create copyrighted works during the research. For example, they might produce photographs, drawings, videos, performances, or other creative materials. If so, have they transferred the relevant copyrights to the researcher? Or have they granted permission for those works to be stored, shared, and reused? Researchers need to determine who owns the copyright and obtain any permissions required to deposit the data in a repository. When researchers hold the copyright, they can define how others may reuse the material, for example, by applying a Creative Commons license. However, copyright is only one part of the decision. Even when copyright law allows a visual work to be reused, data protection responsibilities remain. An open license does not remove the obligation to protect the individuals represented in the data. Depending on the circumstances, restricting access and applying a more restrictive reuse license may therefore be the most appropriate solution. Visual materials should be assessed case by case, balancing participant protection, legal requirements, ethical responsibilities, and the potential value of future research. Sometimes, open sharing will be possible. In other cases, controlled access, limited reuse, or a decision not to publish the visual material may be necessary. To learn more about copyright, data protection, and data security, visit codvis.org.